So, a little update on the truck. Kind of had a bit of an issue the other day. I was coming into work. When I fired the truck up first thing in the morning, everything's fine. Gas fire system's running great. Cruising down the road, I made it 3/4 of the way to work, and I looked down and I was starting to lose oil pressure. This motor typically makes 50 pounds of oil pressure running down the road once it's warmed up. I was down to about 20 cruising, and I came up to a stop sign, stuffed the clutch in, and was sitting there idling, and I was all the way down to 10. So something was not right. Get it down to the shop, and it had been sitting for about 2 hours, and I rolled it into the shop. Still had a little bit of oil pressure, but not much. Things were not looking good. Valves were starting to hammer. It's getting pretty loud. So I pulled it in, dropped the drain plug out of it. So, the engine was still reasonably warm, and I had to go on a service call. Came back about 4 hours later, and the oil had not finished draining yet. I don't know if it's wood gas related, but it had been about 5,000 miles since I did an oil change. I run synthetic in this, and I don't know what happened, but the oil was like molasses coming out of the oil pan. After about 5 hours, it had finally finished draining. I went to dump the oil out of the oil pan, and it came out almost in a block, like cold syrup, just unbelievably thick. Did an oil change, filter, filled it up, pulled it outside, and I was letting it warm up, and I looked down, no oil pressure at all. Shut it off, pushed it back in the shop, trying to figure out what's going on. Left it for the night because I wasn't really sure. Came back the next morning, I pulled the valve covers off, everything was sludged. Started it up, no oil pressure at all, no oil coming through the push rods, nothing coming to the top end, and everything was just incredibly caked, nasty sludge. The engine did warm up a little bit. I drained that oil out, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's very versed in these small block Chevys, much more so than me, and he had the idea that because somehow the oil got thick, potentially the drive shaft for the oil pump had broke off. So I already had the valve covers off, so I dropped the oil pan, and I'll have to show you guys what I found. So for those of you that don't know, this is a small block Chevy oil pump. Those of you that do know, you're going to look at this and say, hey, there's something missing there. And that would be the screen for the pickup tube. That is supposed to be right there. But when I pulled the oil pan off, it was doing this. It was just doing the dangle flop. However it happened, it broke this weld all the way around, and it broke the spot weld that's supposed to locate it in place. So the pickup tube was just flopping around in the oil pan. I'm actually surprised it was still sitting on the pickup tube. How that happened, I honestly have no idea. This motor was set up with this oil pump when I got it, with the oil pan that's on it. I don't even remember when I put this motor in if I ever pulled the pan, because it was a great runner. So I don't think I had a reason to pull it off. So there's the pickup tube. I mean, you can see this thing's been sitting off for almost a day now, and there's still just thick oil sitting on it. It's tacky, like almost like a tar. It doesn't drip. It just sits there. Like I said, I don't know if this is wood gas related. I really don't. Maybe there was somehow soot contaminants getting into the oil. It's possible, and thickened up the oil. But so on a typical small block Chevy, as far as all of them that I know of, underneath your distributor on your distributor drive shaft gear that drives off of the cam. That also drives a keyway on the bottom of the distributor, which has a drive shaft from the oil pump to the distributor. So the camshaft spinning is actually what runs the oil pump. This is the drive shaft itself, and it literally just sits on the oil pump. And for whatever reason, this is very tight going on there. Typically they're not. Well, one of the reasons that it's tight is because this notch right here, because of all the extra added pressure from the thick oil, it was putting a lot of extra load on the oil pump. And even though this has a collar that locks it in place, this right here has actually opened up just a little bit from all the extra force this oil pump was using trying to spin that thick oil. That's just on the bottom side. On the top, where the distributor sits down in here, let's see if I can get it into the frame so you can look really well. It's actually worn crooked, and this fork up here has opened up significantly. And you can see it's way worse on that side. And according to my buddy, these are actually a wear component. I honestly was not aware of that. I figure, you know, it's a solid steel shaft. Not much can go wrong with that. But if you're pumping oil that's somewhere around the consistency of, I don't know, 90 weight, that thing takes a bit of a beating. So I've got an oil pump, pickup tube, and a screen, and a new drive shaft on the way. I'm gonna finish cleaning out the motor as best I can. I don't want to tear the engine down if I don't have to, but what I've had to do so far, so on the oiling system on a Chevy, now I've got roller rockers on this, so it's a little bit different, but not enough for it to really matter. Underneath of the rocker arm here is the push rod, and that push rod goes down, sits on top of the lifter, and the lifter sits on the camshaft. There's an oil passage from the lifter up through the push rod into the rocker, and that's how the rocker and everything in the valve train gets its oil. Now, because that oil was so thick, I had to go through, and you can see the little hole right here where the oil comes through. I put an air nozzle on there and blew all of that thick oil down through the bottom end of the motor, because I have the oil pan off at the moment. So I've gone through, pushed out as much of that sludge crap as I can, pushed it down through the bottom end. I have brake cleaned the heads as much as I can, and there's still sludge sitting down in a couple of the corner pockets. I'm going to stuff rags down in there, get all of that wiped up, get it all clean, and when the new parts get here, we'll get it slammed back together, and hopefully she fires up and has oil pressure.